Hey, I want to talk just a minute about safeties, external versus internal. There are a lot of people who they do not feel safe with a firearm like this. And go ahead and check. It's clear. This gun is just as safe, in my opinion, as this one. All right, so this gun has an external safety. As you can see, you flip it down to fire. And this firearm has no external safety, but it does have safeties internally. So what's the difference? Which gun is safer? Well, I would contend that they're both the exact same, because if you do not break one of the rules of gun safety, which is always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot, they won't fire. Now, we know that a safety, a man-made device, can in fact fail. So this can mess up. We also know that this firearm is man-made and it also can mess up. But the point that I really want to get across to us is being scared of the firearm because it does not have a safety, as a lot of people say, when it actually does have safety, is maybe a learning moment. Maybe we should dig in and learn a little bit more about the firearm, because if the trigger is not depressed to the rear, this firearm will not fire. And the same goes for this. If the trigger is not depressed to the rear, it will not fire. Even if you have the safety off or in the firing position, it will not fire without finger on the trigger depressing to the rear. So what does that tell us about safety when it comes to firearms? It tells us that we need to understand that the trigger guard needs to be protected when it's being carried. We don't need to carry an open trigger in our pocket. We don't need to carry an open trigger in our bag. We don't need to leave a firearm where the trigger can be negligently or accidentally, if you want to go that way, pulled. We need to make sure that we have good trigger control, that we train ourselves, that our finger is off the trigger until it's ready to fire. Unfortunately, Hollywood doesn't help us out with this. They'll have the good guy running across the field with his finger in the trigger guard. However, if we will just pay attention to the highly trained military guys, police officers, different people like that, even those guys who shoot in competition who are trying to put rounds on target in less than a second, their finger is always off the trigger until they're ready to fire. So, is one safer than the other? I guess we'll have to decide personally if that is what works for us or that is something that scares us. But if we will learn that this finger is what determines whether or not the firearm goes off, and what's between our ears is what determines safety, we will be much better off, and it will broaden our horizons as to what type of firearm we can carry. I hope you've enjoyed this little discussion, but more than that, I hope you've learned something, because it is incredibly important that we realize that safety is between your ears and not a function of a firearm.